And the latest twist in the ongoing trade wars, China just threatened the United States with strict export controls on their rare earth metals. They added 5 new elements to the restricted list and now are forcing foreign companies that purchase their materials to have an export license. As of filming this video, the export controls have actually been paused for 1 year during the ongoing negotiations, but we're going to cover how China was able to get this leverage in the first place. So first of all, what even are rare earth metals? Rare earth metals are a set of 17 metallic elements whose names I'm not going to try to pronounce, that are very important in high-tech devices such as smartphones, flat screen TVs, monitors, and electric vehicles. So you could say they're kind of important, but there's actually quite a twist here because these elements aren't actually rare, as in scarce. They're plentiful on the planet, but the process of mining and purifying them to pull out these elements is actually very difficult and requires a massive operation.
Rare earth ores enter here. We left them up with a big crane and we dumped them into these tanks here behind me. These are 100,000 gallon tanks, and once they get into these tanks, we take them through a variety of processes that includes cracking, leaching, solid liquid separations, and some impurity removal.
These elements are spread out very thinly and they're included in compounds that have to be broken down. So tons and tons of raw ore has to be processed and purified to get those elements out. So the biggest challenge in mining these elements is to find an area that's densely packed with them so that when you process the raw ore, it's still economically viable. You're not processing tons and tons of ore and getting a very small amount of these rare earth elements. So basically the process is very expensive and has high barriers of entry for new companies or even new countries that want to enter into this field. So how exactly did China take over the global production of these rare earth metals? In 1993, 38% of the world's production of these rare earth elements was in China, 33% was in the United States, and 12% was in Australia. In 2008, China accounted for more than 90% of the world's production. Then by 2011, China accounted for more than 97% of the global production of these rare earth elements. So how did this happen? How did China become the #1 provider, and how did the US lose its place completely in this industry? Well, there are many reasons for this. The first being China's, let's say, less strict environmental regulations. These Chinese companies are able to start mining and start processing as soon as possible, which significantly cuts down on costs. Now, this is a bad strategy for the planet since it's harming the environment, but it's a great strategy for these companies and China as a whole. Another major reason is the fact that the Chinese government has invested heavily in the refining part of this process.
NdPr, the rare earth compound vital to magnets, is precipitated, washed of impurities, filtered, dried, and finished. Pure rare earth oxide powder is now ready to be transformed into magnetic materials.
So that's the most difficult part in trying to pull out these rare earth elements. So the government has invested in these refining plants and the companies that are actually trying to fill this role so that they can be the global leader in that step. Now, because of this investment, other countries, if they have their own rare earth mining operation, which is very few, they still send their raw ore to be processed in China. So it's cheaper for them to do so. So it seems like even when they have the ability to mine their own raw ore, they have to send it to China for processing, which basically defeats the purpose if your goal was to not be relying on China. Lastly, Chinese suppliers also lowered the cost of their materials intentionally to get rid of any foreign competitors. Then once they became the sole provider, they're able to raise their price. It's basically the Jeff Bezos model, but between countries. Now, all of this can be visualized perfectly with the story of the US Mountain Pass mine in California. Now, this single mine, this single location, used to be the world's leading provider in rare earth elements over the 1960s all the way through the 1980s. This one mine, so not just the US as a whole, but this one mine. Now, this plant was actually shut down in 2002 after a toxic waste spill and the government regulations that were activated afterwards. Now, this isn't a bad thing since I assume we all don't like toxic waste, so it makes sense to have strict regulations regarding that, but it's not the best strategic move in this situation. Now, the mine remained closed for 15 years as the US could not compete with the cheaper Chinese rare earth providers. The mine has recently reopened in 2017, and they started mining and processing again in 2018.
He says this place contains some of the largest concentrations of rare earth elements in the world.
You know, the way that, fault lines formed here to allow, the rock formations to come to the surface and have rare earth bearing minerals in such a concentration and in a form that is so easily leveraged and refined with our technology is something that you really don't see anywhere else in the world.
Because it's so close to the surface.
Exactly, so close to the surface and in a form that is easily digestible, if you will.
Now, this mine is a perfect symbol of how the US used to be a major player in this industry and gave it up, and China came and filled that gap and took complete control of the global production of these rare earth elements. Then in 2010, we hit a major turning point when China, for the first time, used its rare earth advantage against Japan in a foreign policy dispute. This was a wake-up call to the entire developed world that China's leverage in the global earth element trade would be used in any sort of conflict like this. Now fast forward to 2025, and for the first time, they're directly using these rare earth elements to bully the largest, most powerful country in the world. And I honestly can't blame them, since we also use any advantage we can during these negotiations. Now, as a result, the US and other countries are rushing to get their rare earth mining and processing operations up to the level where they can actually break their reliance on China. Now, you can see this with the reopening of the US Mountain Pass mine in California. We're clearly starting to turn in the right direction. But like I explained earlier, this industry, it requires massive operations. So it's going to be a mission that takes years, if not decades, to actually put into fruition.
I don't think that it's realistic to think that this is going to get done in 2 or 4 or 5 years. I think the challenges are too great, and I think the needs are still very, very high.
I forgot to mention that the US Mountain Pass mine's current ownership includes an 8% stake from... yeah, not great. Now we have to closely monitor how much this dependence on China hurts us and how fast we can catch up. But that's all I have, and if you enjoyed this little bit of context, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.